Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, November 17th, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at the most accurate election prediction of the 2020 election cycle. We're talking about very respected sources around the country. We compared this to 538, Inside Elections, a number of other political prediction sources, and this one seemed to be almost spot on. It was off by exactly one state, and the reason why I trust this one and think that because they did call one certain state in particular, I'm very, very happy to present you guys with their electoral map. It was extremely accurate. They called states that a lot of people were very didn't really want to take a risk. They wanted to keep certain states in a certain column just because of historical precedents, and I understand that's a very easy way of predicting a number of states. You wouldn't have said Wyoming was going blue this election season, even though it is a risk. But there were some warning signs in some of these states that certain predictors caught, whereas others did not. So you can actually find this map on the centerforpolitics.org, or you can just go on Google and type in Sabato Crystal Ball. And the first thing that came up for me was the 2020 Electoral College ratings. And what comes out to me here is a very good depiction of what we actually saw on election day. I don't know if you've caught the only inaccuracy on this map, but it comes from North Carolina. Literally everything else is correct. 49 out of the 50 states, including Maine's 2nd District and Nebraska's 2nd District. So those calls were made correctly. The rest of the electoral map, besides North Carolina, has been called correctly, and the margins actually are what surprised me. Now, many of us did expect Montana and Kansas and Utah and Missouri and Indiana to be slightly narrower than where they were back in 2016. Now, they were narrower. All of these states had narrowed up except for the state of Utah, which actually expanded for Donald Trump by 2% as a result of the third-party candidates not being in the race. But in Montana, in Kansas, in Missouri, and Indiana, they are actually very close to being pushed into the likely column. Now, I'm not entirely sure as to how they do their characterizations. For me, a likely state is anywhere between 5 and 15%. In that scenario, Missouri, Indiana, Kansas, and Montana are roughly around 16, 17 points in favor of Donald Trump. So, this is a very good map, besides obviously some of the more, I guess you could say, liberal ratings for these states. The rest of the ratings were practically spot on. They called Florida. They had Florida red while Georgia was blue. And Georgia is the state that I was talking about earlier when I said a specific state in general that I really thought was the important thing to note in the Sabato Crystal Ball. On my electoral map, I got two states wrong. I got Florida and North Carolina. In my mind, I didn't really see why Georgia would be voting to the left of Florida. I mean, the last time Georgia went blue was 1992. So Florida really had no reason to vote red when Georgia was going blue. And in a regular scenario, had I told you 3 days, 2 days, 1 day before the election, if you're not at the Sabato Crystal Ball, if you're not working for the University of Virginia, you probably would have thought I was crazy if I told you Georgia was going to the left of Florida or even to the left of North Carolina. I mean, this is a state that went to Trump by over 5 points in 2016, and then 2020 rolls around, it goes to Biden, despite North Carolina, which was only 3.7 for Trump 4 years ago, Florida, which was only 1.2. So very, very interesting election, but Georgia in particular was the shining star of the Sabato Crystal Ball Electoral College rating map, just because many pundits, many people on YouTube, many people that are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to make these election predictions, they didn't call Georgia. They didn't think Georgia was going to go blue. And that was something that, I thought Georgia was going to go blue. And I'm not trying to say, I got it right. I got two of the other states surrounding it wrong. But Georgia, I still saw that thing that a lot of other people did not see. And the reason why I think that this map, I favor it over the other maps that were also just one state off. What I mean by that is they called Arizona, they called Wisconsin, they called Michigan, they called Pennsylvania. Those were states that I would like to label as, that was a given if it was a Biden victory. Those 4 states in particular were a given. I never once, wavered in my prediction of that as we started getting past the primary season, just because those 4 states in particular have always been pretty solid for Joe Biden. We know now that they weren't actually as solid as I previously thought, but you do have to point out that almost everyone was saying those 4 states in particular were going to flip. However, the Georgia call was a risk. The Georgia call, I mean, maybe not a risk because there was data alluding to a victory for the Democrats there, but it was something that seemed out of the ordinary. I mean, even on this map, it seemed very weird to see Florida red and Georgia blue. This just didn't make sense. And at the time, when I looked at this map, I said I would actually consider Florida to be blue, but also only one of us was right on election day, and it wasn't me. So when you're looking at this Sabato Crystal Ball map, look at some of the other margins. So that's just my explanation as to why I chose this one, despite a number of other maps that I've seen everywhere. I mean, a lot of people predicted Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Arizona to go blue, the rest of the country to go red. Even the political predicting markets finalized on that map on election day. But Georgia was the one that was a really big shock to many of us, and this was one of the only established firms to actually get it correct and actually the closest result to the actual election. But Minnesota, New Hampshire, Colorado, New Mexico, and Virginia, what do they all share? They're likely for Joe Biden. Why is that important? Because they were all likely for Joe Biden on election day. Well, what about Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania? When people were characterizing it as likely, and, when I was saying, Joe Biden's probably going to win here, 4 or 5% at a minimum, obviously the polls had inaccuracies. Obviously, they didn't correct what they supposedly were supposed to over the past 4 years. Obviously, they missed a certain voting block. Now, they did predict the outcome of the election winner correctly. I will give them that. But the fact that they swung more than they did in 2016 was sort of a pretty big sign that maybe they didn't fix themselves. I mean, I had confidence in them after 2018, which was a stellar performance for a lot of these polls. But 2020 rolls around. Whenever Trump is included on a poll, they somehow miss a lot of the sentiment felt around President Trump. So maybe it's Trump. Maybe it's the polling data. The polling data is typically way more accurate when Trump isn't on the ballot. I think just because a lot of people sort of shame voters for voting for Donald Trump, so they may not necessarily want to be judged, or because Donald Trump has instilled such a distrust in the media or the polling industry that they may lie to the polling firm or just not answer. So there are a number of things that could skew the actual result. And also the fact that sometimes they do their polls based off party registration. Well, up until recently, I believe actually still the Democrats have a registration advantage in West Virginia. And West Virginia went to Trump by 30 points this election. So I just wanted to point that out. It's not always the best way to get an accurate prediction as to how people are going to be voting in this election. But, I mean, look at the ratings. They called Arizona and Nevada. They both put them in the lean Democratic column. That's exactly where they were, considering they don't have a tilt area. That's exactly where they were on election day. They called Alaska and South Carolina correctly. Texas. I mean, Texas arguably could have been likely, but I don't know if they're using my exact rating. So, I mean, it makes sense. If they're considering Missouri and Kansas to be likely, they probably weren't going to consider Texas to be likely as well, just because Texas was going to be much closer than both of those states, and they were. Texas voted for Trump by 10 points less than Kansas and Missouri. So it may not have been the best idea to keep them in the same characterization, but I mean, they got Texas correct. Like I said, they got every single state correctly. Comparing it to the actual results, there's not much of a difference. I mean, if we're talking about the North Carolina call, I guess you could say that's the only part that really struck out to me. The only part that I thought was pretty interesting. Maine's 2nd district was called correctly, even though election data and polls had said, Biden's going to win Maine's 2nd district. I believe 538 on election day had Biden up in Maine's 2nd district. I said it was going to Trump. Sabata Crystal Ball said it was going to Trump. A number of other firms did as well, but you can't deny the fact that they have literally gotten 49 states plus the district plus 2 other congressional districts correct out, I guess, a total of 53 predicted races. It's just, or 54, because DC, Maine's 1st, Maine's 2nd, and Nebraska's 2nd. But I think this is just fascinating that it was so accurate. I mean, so incredibly accurate. Iowa, Ohio called correctly. Texas called correctly. Now, Iowa and Ohio definitely expanded off their margins, but Ohio, once all the ballots are cast as possible, could narrow down 6% of a lead for Trump, and Iowa won't really change much. But overall, I mean, they got a nail on the head. While they did have some underestimates for the Republican Party, maybe in Kansas or Utah and Montana, well, at the end of the day, they accurately predicted the election winners, and it was much more narrower than a lot of the other firms had put it. I mean, I thought that Biden was going to win Wisconsin and Michigan by likely margins. I was completely blindsided by a lot of the inaccurate data there. And when we're looking at the election results now, it's very nice to see, I guess, if you're from the UVA Center for Politics, that this map is almost spot on. 49 states. I mean, I see a number of other maps that were 49 states accurate without Georgia, but Georgia was a call that, really nobody would have called blue without North Carolina being blue as well, and they characterized it as blue. And Florida probably would have had to go blue if we were talking about one of my predictions or a number of other ones. But Florida, such a weird state, voted to the right of where they did in 2016, despite literally every other swing state doing the opposite. Voting more for Biden than they did for Clinton, voting less for Trump than they did in 2016. So Florida, shocked us all, but I guess they saw it coming in Virginia, and it's just a very nice map to take a look at. So like I said, you can go ahead and find this on centerforpolitics.org. You can go to the crystal ball, the Sabato crystal ball. You can find the 2020 presidential electoral college rankings. No toss-ups on this map, just pure predictions, and it ended up being one of the most accurate election maps of the entire cycle. 1 state off. For me, I was 2 states off. So they've done it better than me. 1 state off is something you should definitely relish in. Had they called North Carolina red, it would have been the absolute most perfect map. But that would just be pretty unrealistic. I don't really think many of us expect North Carolina to be this red state and then Georgia all of a sudden being a blue state, despite North Carolina going blue as recently as 2008. So I think Georgia really threw all of us for a loop, but I really applaud them for making this projection, calling the state of Georgia with Florida going red, despite a lot of people saying, what is the justification for this? Why does this make any sense? Well, they certainly saw something that many of us did not, and I think that they should definitely be applauded for it, and it was one of the most, if not the most accurate 2020 electoral maps from one of the most credible prediction sources out there. So like I said, go ahead and find that on their website. It's very interesting. Just Google University of Virginia Center for Politics 2020 election prediction. This should come up. So check it out for yourself. You can explore their website a little bit more. There's a lot more out there, but this is just a fascinating electoral college prediction. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.